So, guess what?
What?
I have a story.
No way.
I know.
I'm shocked.
I know.
May have a heart attack.
Well, don't, because it would feel awkward trying to tell this story to a dead person.
Not all people who have heart attacks die.
I think if they don't get any sort of medical attention, then it's more likely that they're going to die.
I guess that's true. And it's really hard to get medical attention here.
Yeah.
Okay.
It takes like an hour for them to get the ambulance here when the ambulance is literally across the street.
So you have a story?
I do. It's about aliens.
Ooh. So I am in a bit of a predicament.
Oh?
Yeah, so remember you asked me to get a story ready just in case your story wasn't very long.
Mm-hmm.
So I did.
Okay.
But it ended up being way more interesting than I thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so it may be kind of long. And so if your story doesn't take up the amount of time you want it to take up, this is just going to be a longer episode.
Okay.
But if your story takes up our regular amount of time, I'll just tell you the story next week.
Okay, well, I guess we'll see. I guess you better have a lot of commentary on this story, and I'll try to read slow.
Great. Yeah, no, I was working on it, and I was like, oh, this will be super quick and easy, and then there was like a lot more to it, and then I was like, well, it's too late to turn back now.
This one, I probably could have added a little more information because I was watching a documentary about it, and they added a lot more, like, detail, but it seemed like really irrelevant details.
Yeah.
And so I kind of made it a little more concise. So I guess we'll see.
All right.
And you've probably heard this story before because it's a pretty, I don't know, famous story about UFO abduction. But it's a story of Betty and Barney Hill.
Oh, Betty and Barney, the Flintstones.
Yeah, that always gets me.
The Rebels.
Yes, every single time I hear their names, I'm just like, I mean, I guess there are plenty of people out there in the world named Betty and Barney, but how often do you get a couple named Betty and Barney?
I guess at least twice.
At least twice. Once was a modern Stone Age family, and once was a couple that got abducted by aliens. So.
Both interesting.
Both very interesting.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a story of Betty and Barney Hill, or I think they call it the Zeta Reticuli incident.
That's a very fancy name.
I know. I think it's a star system.
That sounds correct.
Yeah. Okay. So, Betty and Barney Hill were an interracial couple from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Barney being black and Betty being white, during a period of time when it was more uncommon in the U.S., this being the 1960s.
Yeah, that is weird. Like, you don't usually hear about interracial couples at that time because it was literally against the law.
Yeah. I heard that this particular town in New Hampshire had a pretty large, like, black population, and the thing was, like, I think it was on the documentary, and so they were saying, you know, not to assume that the town wasn't racist because of this, but I don't know. They didn't seem to have a whole lot of problem with Betty and Barney. Barney had wanted to be an engineer because he went to college to be an engineer, but they told him that because he was black that he couldn't be an engineer.
Ridiculous. I think, sorry, this is going back to New Hampshire.
That's fine.
Don't hold me to this, but I'm thinking New Hampshire is one of those states that's like always blue.
Yeah, I don't know.
That, like, oh, I don't know. But I think they're pretty liberal. I don't know. But yeah, that's so mean. Like, I don't understand why he couldn't have had that job.
They said that he would never be able to be an engineer because of the color of his skin.
Ridiculous.
So, anyway, so Barney ended up being a United States Postal Service worker, and Betty was a social worker. They were active in their local Unitarian congregation, and both were members of the NAACP, as well as Barney sitting on the board for their local United States Commission of Civil Rights.
Cool.
At this time, the Hills had been married for 16 months, but they had yet to go on a honeymoon, so they decided to go on an impromptu 3-day trip to Montreal and Niagara Falls.
Nice.
I feel like Niagara Falls was a more popular destination in, like, the 60s and stuff.
Yeah, because, yeah, like, if you watch old movies or old TV shows...
People are always going to Niagara Falls, but I don't feel like you hear
And it was like a place where people would go to like get married or go on their honeymoon or...
But I don't feel like you hear about as many people going to Niagara Falls now as you used to.
Because we don't go outside anymore.
I guess. We don't touch grass.
We don't. We look at it on the internet.
Yes, we look at pictures of grass on TikTok.
Yes.
So on September 19th, 1961, at about 10:30 p.m., the Hills were on their way back from their vacation. Betty noticed a light in the sky that seemed to move. She originally thought she was seeing a shooting star, but the light was moving upward.
Ooh, like those lights we saw.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those like weird hopscotch
like
leapfrogging
lights
that we saw.
Yeah, that was weird because they were like going up and diagonally.
Yeah. So Barney was a World War II vet and a plane enthusiast, and he didn't think much of the light. He assumed it was just a passenger jet or a satellite that had gone off course.
So he can fight for the country, but he can't build your bridges.
Well, yeah, he's allowed to get shot, just...
Okay, sorry, go ahead. Continue. Irritated.
Yes. So the light appeared to follow them and get bigger and brighter as they drove on, mile after mile. It would occasionally disappear behind the trees and reappear moments later. The couple eventually grew very curious and pulled over at a rest stop to investigate the light. Through a pair of binoculars, Betty saw an odd-shaped spinning craft and thought it to be a flying saucer. Barney did not put as much stock in the idea of UFOs and aliens, but after observing the flying craft descending towards them, he wasn't sure what else to call it either and agreed with Betty.
I'm really glad that the lights we saw didn't chase us.
Right. Yeah, they said that the craft or whatever seemed to stalk them.
Crazy. That's so creepy.
Yeah. So the couple continued driving, slowly observing the craft as it flew silently and erratically, bouncing back and forth like a ping pong ball in the sky, following them until they reached Route 3 in Lincoln, New Hampshire, at which point the craft hovered just 100 feet above the car, encompassing the entire field of view of the windshield.
That is no bueno.
No.
I don't know. Have you ever heard Mom's UFO story? I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
Oh, it's fine. I feel like I have before, but like I don't remember the details of it.
I mean, it's been a long time since she's told it to me, and she would have to tell me in more detail. But I remember it was like something to do with like the house that like we lived in when you were born. Mm-hmm. And that she was like laying in bed, and I can't remember if it was like night or like early morning, but she swears that like a UFO was like hovering over the house because she kept hearing like the wah, wah, wah sound or whatever. And so,
which I mean, a lot of the times you hear that they're completely silent, which people find weird because they're like so big.
Right. And so like that's what that reminded me of, like it just hovering over top of their car.
Yeah. So, Barney stopped the car and got out with his handgun and binoculars.
That's the way the Americans deal with things.
He recalled the craft being the size of a jet and as flat as a pancake. Through the windows of the craft, he saw 8 to 11 humanoid beings wearing gray or black uniforms. He tried to raise his gun, but was aware of the fact that he could not for some reason.
Okay.
One source said that Barney was told to put down his binoculars. Another source said that he was told to, quote, stay where you are and keep looking.
That sounds very, like, bandit-y.
Yeah.
Keep looking.
Yeah, like, keep staring at the craft.
Oh, okay.
So, I find there's another instance in this story where they're basically told to keep looking at the craft. I don't know why specifically, but...
I wonder if it was, like, some kind of, like, mind control thing where they were trying to, like, garner information, and so they needed, like, a connection or something.
But just then, wing-like fins with red lights came out from the sides of the craft, and a long apparatus like a ladder or a ramp started coming out of the bottom of the craft.
If you want me to get in that craft, it better be a ramp.
Yeah. The craft continued to get closer to a distance of about 50 to 80 feet above the car and about 300 feet away from them. Fearing that he was about to be captured, Barney ran back to the car and sped off. At some point, they heard strange beeping noises coming from their trunk. They became drowsy as if in a daze and lost consciousness. They heard more beeping and returned to consciousness, realizing they were now 35 miles down the road with very little recollection of what had just happened.
So they heard the beeping and they got drowsy while they're driving?
Yeah.
Okay. And beeping would be weird in a car in the 1960s because it was not like our stuff now.
They also said that there was like a tingling sensation, kind of like if you put like a tuning fork to your body. And some things call it a buzzing sound, not a beeping sound, but
regardless,
there was a weird noise coming from their trunk, and then they lost consciousness.
Okay, and so then they traveled 35 miles.
Yeah, when they woke back up, they were 35 miles down the road.
I mean,
without knowing how they got there.
There are days when I'm like, I don't remember.
Oh, I know. I disassociate all the time when I'm driving, and I'm just like, wow, I'm glad I didn't get in a wreck or run any stop signs or anything, because I don't even remember getting here.
Okay, no policeman's listen to this.
It's not intentional. And apparently I'm doing a good job.
That's right. Okay, but this time it was aliens.
Yes, this time they could blame it on aliens. I can't blame it on that. Or maybe I can. Maybe it was aliens.
Perhaps.
So they arrived home at about dawn, and they stated that they had some odd sensations and impulses that they could not explain. Barney's good shoes were scuffed, and Betty's dress was torn, and both of their watches had stopped, and they never worked again.
Weird.
Betty would not bring the luggage into the main part of the house, but she rather insisted that they would be left by the front door. They both took showers to remove possible contaminants, and each drew a picture of what they had seen. Betty considered getting rid of the dress she had worn during the incident, but ultimately decided to put it in her closet. She later retrieved the dress from her closet and noticed a pinkish powder on it. She hung it on the clothesline and the powder blew away. She put the dress back in her closet, and over the years, 5 labs have conducted various analyses on the dress. But I didn't see anything about, like, their findings, which is kind of a bummer. I assume that means they didn't find anything conclusive or interesting.
Yeah, and it's a shame that she, like, put it outside and let the powder blow away, especially if she thinks that it was alien.
Right, because she was the first one, and Barney, even years later, said that he still didn't believe in aliens, even after all this happened.
Yeah, weird.
But she, until her death, was very adamant that they were abducted by aliens.
So you would think that she would, like, take that immediately somewhere and be like, this is alien powder.
Like, weird alien powder is on my dress. Do something about it.
Who would you go to?
I don't know. She calls the Air Force.
Okay, maybe that's right.
But they tried to recall and piece together the series of events that happened after seeing the UFO and on their drive home, but immediately after they had heard the sounds in the trunk, their memories became fragmented and they could not recall what happened. Betty called her sister, whose neighbor was a physicist, and asked her to ask the neighbor what they thought they should do. He suggested that they take a compass out to their car and see how it reacted. I guess the magnetic fields or whatever.
Like it would have, like, messed with it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
So when they did this, they found these polished circles all over the trunk of their car that weren't there the day before. Like, before the incident happened.
Yeah, that's weird. I wonder what that would have been.
And when they put the compass to the circles, it began to spin, like, wildly. But if they would move the compass away from the circles, it would stop.
Weird. So, let's assume they were not abducted by aliens for a second. Right. And let's assume that the circles were really on their car.
Mm-hmm. I've seen pictures.
What would have made those?
I don't know. They were, like, highly polished. They were the same color as the car, but they were, like, really polished.
Mm-hmm. I mean, granted, we don't know that they weren't there before because we didn't see their car before. But
I have seen pictures of them. I saw a thing that said they were concentric circles, but they were more like blotches from what I saw. But
that's weird. Okay.
So Betty began spending hours researching the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, or NICAP as it is more commonly referred to. Easier to say as well. Okay. Which is a civilian UFO group.
What's the other one? MUFON?
MUFON.
Yeah.
The Mutual UFO Network.
Yeah.
And out of fear of radiation poisoning, she also called the Air Force.
Okay.
Over the next few years, the couple suffered from anxiety and very disturbing dreams.
Same.
10 days after the encounter, Betty began to have vivid dreams that would occur over 5 consecutive nights. There was an encounter with human-like entities that surrounded their car and captured the couple. They took them into the craft and began to physically examine the hills. She began to write her dreams down, wondering if these dreams represented the reality of what had happened to them during the time that they could not remember.
Yeah, like her subconscious was like showing her.
Yeah, because they couldn't remember what happened, but she kept having these dreams about the aliens doing things to them, and so she and I think like her manager or whatever at work were like, you know, maybe this is actually what happened to you.
Yeah, because like even like maybe in her dreamlike state it was like hypnosis, like remembering those things.
In one dream, they encountered a roadblock with men surrounding their car. She lost consciousness, but as she began to regain it, she realized she was being forced by two small men through the dark forest. Barney was behind her, and she attempted to call out to him, but he appeared to be in a trance. The men appeared to be nearly human, with dark eyes, dark hair, prominent noses, gray skin, and bluish lips.
That hair?
Okay, so in one account, they say that they had hair, like dark black hair, and noses and stuff. But in another account, they say that they were completely bald and had, like, the wraparound eyes, like a typical description of gray aliens.
Like what you would think of if you, like, thought of an alien. Because I don't think that I have ever heard of a story where somebody described an alien with hair.
Yeah. Well, they were, like, humanoid, according to them. Like...
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know.
Who knows? So they were taken back to their car and told to wait and watch them depart. So there they go again, telling them to stare.
Yeah.
Which they did before continuing their drive. On October 21st, 1961, Walter Webb, a Boston-based astronomer and member of NICAP, met with the Hills. For 6 hours, he conducted an interview in which the Hills tried to recall everything they could about the alleged UFO encounter. Barney said that he had developed a mental block, probably resulting from parts of the encounter that he did not want to remember.
What is this guy?
He is just a member of NICAP.
Oh, okay. So he has, like, UFO knowledge.
Yes.
Okay. It's not like she just went to, like, her physicist friend again.
No, I don't remember exactly how this guy heard of the Hills. Mm-hmm. But like I said, he's an astronomer and he's a member of NICAP. And so he's talking to them about their UFO encounter.
Okay.
Webb said that the Hills were credible and had no reason to fabricate or embellish on the incident. He said that they were telling the truth and the incident probably occurred exactly as reported, except for some minor uncertainties and technicalities that must be tolerated in any such observations where human judgment is involved, such as exact time and length of visibility, apparent sizes of objects and occupants, distance and height of objects, etc.
Well, it's just like with, like, eyewitnesses to, like, crimes and stuff, how, like, they're not, very precise, or not precise, but, I don't know, like, your recollection gets distorted, and so they're not, reliable. That was the word I was looking for. They're not very reliable.
And your brain tends to filter out things that you don't necessarily think are important at the time.
True. And I was gonna say your brain also, like, tries to fill in gaps of things too, so.
And so he thinks that, you know, their story was pretty credible, except, you know, the minor details that you may not remember exactly, like how tall the aliens or whatever you want to call them were, or, you know, things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They were later interviewed again by two investigators by the names of Jackson and Homan. I didn't find any information about exactly who these guys were.
Yeah, I was going to say investigators of what?
Yeah, I don't know who these guys were. I, like, in the stuff that I read and even in the like, documentary that I watched, I don't remember anything saying, like, who these guys actually were.
Yeah, like, are they police investigators? Are they, like, men in black suits?
Right.
Men in black suits.
I mean,
they
that's
are
who the men in
suits,
black are,
men in black, yeah. The men in black suits.
Yes. During the interview, the pair became particularly interested in the fact that the 4-hour drive took them 6 hours. When Jackson and Homan asked the Hills about this, they had no explanation for their missing time.
Yeah, well, they had that one, like, blackout. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, that was only 30 minutes.
No, they were 35 miles down the road.
Yeah.
We don't know how long they were actually, like, abducted for.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, you're right.
And so...
You're correct on yours.
Yes.
Your telling of your story.
Yes. But, you know, missing time is also a common thing that you hear about with alien abduction.
That's true, yeah. Missing time freaks me out.
Yeah. But you also hear a lot, like it had mentioned that their watches had stopped. You hear a lot about, like, watches stopping, like, at the time of the abduction. Mm-hmm. And then people come back and it's like, X amount of minutes or hours or whatever later.
Days or, yeah.
Yeah. So eventually the Hills underwent hypnosis by Dr. Benjamin Simons to try and recall details of their encounter. Under hypnosis, Barney recalled speeding away in his car from the UFO, but then being compelled to drive into the woods. He spotted 6 of the beings on a dirt road. Afterwards, the car stalled, and 3 of the beings came towards them. He described the beings similarly with the way that Betty had described them, but focusing mostly on their eyes. He said that the beings stared into his eyes with mesmerizing effect. He was quoted as saying, "Oh, those eyes, they were in my brain."
Oh, those eyes.
And he also said, "I was told to close my eyes because I saw 2 eyes coming close to mine, and I felt the eyes had pushed into my eyes."
Gross.
And all I see are these eyes. I'm not even afraid that they're not connected to a body. They're just there. They're just up close to me, pressing against my eyes.
Don't touch me with your eyeballs.
Right?
That's...
Don't detach your eyeballs and touch my eyeballs with your eyeballs.
Gross. Ew. I don't like that at all. Ew. Okay.
He also mentioned a conversation between Betty and the leader. Betty had recalled this conversation in English, but Barney said that it sounded like a mumbling language. He said that the few times they communicated, it seemed to be through thought transference, as he put it, because at this time he didn't know the word telepathy.
Yeah.
Under hypnosis, it was stated that the gray beings led them up a long ramp into the craft. Inside, the Hills were separated and tested. They climbed onto metal tables and removed their clothes. Then the beings would pluck their hair and take clippings from their nails and peel off parts of their skin.
Gross.
Yeah.
Did they have all of their skin when they came to?
I don't know. It never mentions anything about any marks on their bodies or anything.
And, like, were their nails shorter than they were when they started?
But in an interview, Betty said that the beings seemed to be, like, really interested in her skin.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is twice, I guess, 2 episodes in a row where we talked about skin.
Yeah.
Ugh. Okay.
The samples were placed on objects resembling microscope slides. They also probed needles into their arms, legs, and heads, and Betty recalled that 1 needle was inserted into her stomach as a pregnancy test.
Into their heads?
What they said.
Gross.
Yeah.
These aliens are gross.
I mean, I feel like all probings are pretty gross.
True. I guess I just never hear them with such detail about what happens.
So when Betty was hypnotized, remember this was all Barney, when Betty was hypnotized, her account was similar to her 5 dreams. However, several details were greatly different than what she had said before, mostly pertaining to her capture and release, as well as technology and the description of the beings were quite different, and the sequence of events. Despite this, under hypnotic regression, Betty and Barney's accounts seemed to line up with one another's.
Okay, but they said they looked different.
Yeah. So I guess maybe in their awake state, that's when they talked about them having, like, hair and noses and stuff. And then, like, in their hypnotic state, they talked about them being bald. I don't know.
Yeah.
It doesn't really go... Nothing really went into detail about, like, what the differences were.
That one guy from the UFO museum can rest easy knowing that these aliens were wearing uniforms.
They even had hats.
They were not naked.
No. So he doesn't have to be upset that, they're naked.
Yeah.
Because he takes great offense to them being naked.
Sure does.
So in 1966, John G. Fuller, along with the cooperation of the Hills and Dr. Simon, wrote the book The Interrupted Journey about the case. In the book, he included a star map which Betty had drawn. The star map was later viewed by Marjorie Fish, a schoolteacher and amateur astronomer from Oak Harbor, Ohio. She wanted to see if it could be deciphered to figure out the origin of the spacecraft. She eventually narrowed it down to the Zeta Reticuli system, but after many years of rebuttals from people including Carl Sagan, she eventually made a public statement rejecting her own hypothesis.
Okay. Well, I guess if Carl Sagan tells you you're wrong, you're probably wrong.
They were saying that if she hadn't, like, drawn lines between the stars, because, like, Betty had drawn a star map, and I guess hers had lines on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so this lady had remade the star map out of, like, beads and string or wire or something. And people were saying that if she hadn't, like, connected the dots, then it wouldn't have lined up with anything.
Okay. So
it
she was just like
any stars.
making it work.
Like, she originally didn't think she was, and there was somebody who agreed that, you know, there were plenty of stars that did line up with her thing, but other people were saying that certain stars were, like, too far away. Like, they appeared to be in that alignment, but they were actually a lot farther away.
Yeah.
And so even she eventually was like, okay, never mind.
Oh, okay.
A local from the area that the Hills described the encounter happening in, John McDonald, said that the Hills confused an aircraft warning beacon for what they thought they saw. He noted that from the road, the beacons disappear and reappear at the same time as the Hills described the UFO as doing so. So I guess like the red blinky lights that you see.
Oh, yeah.
That warn aircraft not to run into things.
Uh-huh, yeah. And I wonder if, like, at this time, if those would have been kind of new.
Yeah. But he said that the rest of the incident can be ascribed to stress, sleep deprivation, and false memories being recovered under hypnosis. UFO expert Robert Schaefer, who coincidentally is the same person who was disproving or whatever the last UFO story that I told about Lana Zamora.
Uh-huh.
This guy's supposed to be a UFO expert, but everything that I've ever read about him, he's just saying, nope, this didn't happen.
It's like, I just want one legitimate UFO, guys.
Anyway, so he wrote, and I want to quote this whole thing because it was difficult to paraphrase. He said, I was present at the National UFO Conference in New York City in 1980, at which Betty presented some of the UFO photos she had taken. She showed what must have been far more than 200 slides, mostly of blips, blurs, and blobs against a dark background. These were supposed to be UFOs coming in close, chasing her car, landing, etc. After her talk had exceeded about twice its allotted time, Betty was literally jeered off the stage by what had at first been a sympathetic audience. This incident, witnessed by many of ufology's leaders and top activists, removed any lingering doubts about Betty's credibility. She had none. In 1995, Betty Hill wrote a self-published book, A Common Sense Approach to UFOs. It is filled with delusional stories, such as seeing entire squadrons of UFOs in flight and a truck levitating above the freeway.
I feel sorry for her.
Yeah.
It's like, I got abducted by an alien and you guys are being mean.
So, like, she continued to, like, claim this happened until her death.
So, how did she have so many pictures of it? Did she have a camera?
I don't know. I've never heard anything about a camera.
Or are these, like, UFOs she had seen since then?
I haven't seen anything that goes into detail about that.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. It's just what this guy says happened at a UFO conference.
Those ufologists,
Ufologists?
yeah, I know you hate it when people say that, and then I did. They're mean. You would think they would be, like, more, like, welcoming and, like, open-minded because it's a very...
Well, and that's what he said. He said that they had originally been a sympathetic audience, but then eventually they jeered her off stage. And
your story's got to be pretty bad if people who believe in, like, conspiracy stuff are,
there's
like...
people there
absolutely
because
not.
they believe in UFOs.
Yeah.
It's a UFO conference.
Right.
And people are like, okay, get off the stage.
We don't believe you.
Anyway, so Barney died in February 25th, 1969 of a cerebral hemorrhage at the age of 46, and Betty died of cancer on October 17th, 2004 at the age of 85. And that's that story.
That was a story.
Yeah.
Hey, you made it last.
I did. I think we blabbed enough to make it last long enough.
We sure did. People love it when people blab on podcasts.
Yes.
All right. Well, then I'll save my story for next week, which means I have no work to do this week for this.
You just have to edit it.
I just meant, like,
Oh, yeah.
I don't have to research.
This week you don't have to research something new.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I always wait until, like, hours before we record to do it anyway. But...
And it takes me, like, 15,000 years to research something, and so...
I literally wrote the one that I have ready in, like, I don't know, an hour and a half, 2 hours.
And I only had, like, 4 resources on this story, and it still took me, like, forever to write it.
Yeah.
I get all overwhelmed.
I think my thing is, like, I don't want to, like, copy what somebody else said, but sometimes things are just said in the same way no matter who says them.
Well, I know, and that's one of my problems is, like, trying to read this stuff and then put it in my own words when, I don't know, you're just so tempted to say it the way they say it.
Yeah.
Because you can't really think of another way to say it. And that's why I quoted so many things in there, because it just, like, wasn't stuff that I could really paraphrase.
It's like research paper anxiety.
Mm-hmm. You don't want to get caught plagiarizing.
That's right. All right. Well, thanks for telling me an alien story.
Yeah, no problem.
And remember, you can find us on social media at Twisted and Mysterious, or you can email us at twistedandmysteriousPodcast@gmail.com.
We would love to hear from you, especially if you have any stories of your own.
Yes, please.
Or story suggestions.
Yep, that helps too. We got anything else?
I don't think so. Maybe in another 10 episodes I'll have another story.
Every 10. Ooh, it's the 10th one, isn't it?
I think so.
Ooh. It's like an anniversary almost.
Yes. We did a whole 10.
Yeah.
We've actually done a lot more if we didn't have so many technical difficulties.
Yeah, I think we would be on 12, maybe. Well, we made it to 10.
Yes.
And honestly, with our lack of follow through, I didn't think we'd make it to like 3.
Yeah.
So
we're pretty good at giving up on stuff.
we are. All right. Well,
if it was up to me doing stories every week, we probably would not have gotten to 3.
That's true. It's like hyperfixation, I don't know. Lately, I haven't been wanting to, like, research things because I've been watching TV, because I was watching The Good Doctor, which I accidentally finished last night.
Yeah.
And because I was, like, 3/4 of the way through the last episode before I realized I was watching the last episode. And so that kind of was a bummer, but at least I don't have that to, like, put my attention on anymore. So maybe I can feel a little more comfortable taking time away to research now.
Now you can hyperfixate on that Noah Wyle show on
Ooh.
Max.
I do love Noah Wyle. He's a great doctor.
Yes.
He's not the good doctor. He's the great doctor. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that's all we have for you this week. So remember that people are gross and don't get murdered.
Bye-bye.
Bye.